What would you do if the law called you irresponsible on the exact day you were trying to keep your child alive? Drop a comment telling us whether mercy belongs in a courtroom before you hear how this ends. Because in less than 10 minutes, Judge Caprio would hear one sentence that made him take off his glasses, lower his head, and fight tears in front of a packed room. By the time this hearing was over, nobody in Providence Municipal Court would ever forget the sound of that silence. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the truth deserves a full hearing, especially when the first impression looks ugly. This wasn't just another traffic case. This was a collision between paperwork and pain, between a city file and a mother who looked like she had run out of places to hide. And if you think you already know where this story is going, you don't. Like this video if you believe there are two sides to every case, because what started as outrage would turn into disbelief, then into something even more powerful than sympathy. It would become proof that justice, when it has a heart, can still change a life. The morning felt ordinary at first. Friday, March 14, 2025, 8:47 a.m., Providence Municipal Court, case number PV 25-18417, second floor, fluorescent lights humming softly over the wood benches, the American flag still, the city seal catching a hard stripe of pale winter sun through the narrow windows facing Washington Street. The room smelled faintly of old paper, floor polish, and wet coats. The kind of room where people usually spoke in low voices, stared at their shoes, and hoped their number wouldn't be called too soon. Then the clerk, Marissa Bloom, read the next case. Elena Morales. Heads turned right away. Not because anyone knew her. Not yet. But because the woman who stood up from the back row did it with the energy of someone who had been holding herself together by force. She was 34, 5'3", dark hair twisted into a rough bun that had started to collapse, a faded Old Navy cardigan over a black t-shirt, black slacks that had been ironed days earlier and worn hard since then, and gray Skechers with whitening soles. In her left hand, she carried a plastic accordion folder held together by a green elastic band. In her right hand, a set of keys with a cracked blue keychain shaped like a cartoon dolphin. She did not look meek. She looked exhausted and angry, and in a courtroom, anger always arrives before explanation. Share this with someone who needs to see that the face of struggle doesn't always look soft. Sometimes it looks irritated. Sometimes it looks defensive. Sometimes it looks exactly like Elena Morales looked that morning when she stepped to the microphone and fixed her jaw like she was preparing to be hit. Judge Frank Caprio looked down at the file, then up at her. He had seen every kind of defendant walk into that room, the entitled ones, the charming ones, the dishonest ones, the broken ones. But the ones he watched most carefully were the ones who came in fighting before anyone had spoken. He knew something most people in the gallery didn't. Anger is often grief with its fists up. "Ms. Morales," he said, voice even, "you have 3 citations, 1 failure to appear, and associated penalties totaling $684. The number landed hard. A few people in the gallery let out that tiny involuntary breath people make when a fine sounds bigger than a paycheck. Elena didn't react. She was staring at the judge, chin high, eyes ringed with the dull red of missleep. Officer Daniel Keene stood at the side table in a dark blue Providence parking enforcement uniform, silver badge clean, posture straight. He was 42, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, the kind of officer people described as professional but not warm. He opened his citation log with the rhythm of routine. "Your Honor, the defendant's vehicle, a 2008 Honda Odyssey, Rhode Island plate 1BW472, received citations on January 18, February 3, and February 27. Violations include parking in an emergency loading zone, expired registration, and stopping in a school pickup lane during posted restricted hours. Notices were mailed. No response. A boot order was issued." That was enough to tilt the room against her. An emergency loading zone, a school pickup lane, failure to appear. It sounded bad. It sounded like somebody who thought rules were for other people. It sounded like the kind of case viewers love to hate before they know a thing. And Alina leaned into the microphone and made it worse. "You make it sound like I was out joyriding," she said. The room tightened. Her tone wasn't apologetic, it wasn't careful, it had steel in it. Officer Keene glanced at the judge. Marissa Bloom's fingers paused over the keyboard. Even the bailiff, Jerome Ellis, shifted his weight. Judge Caprio didn't flinch. "Nobody said that." "No," Alina said. "You just put a price tag on everything and call that fair." The ray it was. The line that made several heads in the gallery turn fully toward her now. She sounded arrogant, ungrateful, difficult. For some people in the room, the verdict had already formed in their minds. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Ms. Morales, anger may explain your voice, but it won't answer my question." That line hit the room like a gavel, even though he never raised one. Alina swallowed, but she didn't back down. Then ask the right question. Most judges would have cut her off. Some would have warned her. A few would have raised their voices. Caprio just watched her for a beat too long, the way only someone with years of reading faces can. Everyone in the room felt it. This was the moment where things could go one of two ways. Either she was about to bury herself, or something underneath that anger was about to surface. Like this video, if you've ever seen someone judged before they got the chance to tell the truth, because the next answer changed the temperature in that room by 10 degrees. "All right," Judge Caprio said. "Why didn't you come to court when you got the notices?" Alina laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because the question hit a nerve too raw to touch gently. "I didn't get them." Officer Keene looked at the file. They were mailed to the registered address on Douglas Avenue. They were mailed to a place I wasn't living anymore. "Why not?" She hesitated. This was the first crack, small, but everybody saw it. The woman who had sounded sharp and almost contemptuous just seconds ago suddenly looked like she had been asked to step barefoot on broken glass. Her thumb rubbed the edge of the accordion folder, so hard the green elastic snapped off and hung loose. Judge Caprio's voice softened, but only slightly. "Why weren't you living there anymore, Ms. Morales?" Alina looked down, not at the judge, not at the officer, at her own shoes. "Because by then," she said quietly, "we didn't have a home." You could hear the radiator click in the corner. Not a cough, not a whisper, just that small metallic sound and then nothing. The gallery had been leaning away from her. Now it leaned in. Officer Keene glanced at the judge again. Marissa Bloom resumed typing, slower this time. Jerome Ellis's expression changed from alert to human. Even Caprio's eyes narrowed in that particular way that meant he was no longer hearing a traffic case. He was hearing a life. Alina cleared her throat, as if she regretted saying it out loud. "Who is we?" the judge asked. "My children," she said, "and my mother for a while." "For a while." My mother couldn't stay in the shelter. Oxygen machine. Dialysis transport. Too many rules. Too many stairs in the places we could afford, so we moved around. There was the first turn. But wait, there was more. The officer lifted a document from the file and almost apologetically reminded the court that homelessness did not explain all three violations. The emergency zone ticket had been issued at Roger Williams Medical Center. The school lane violation was at 3:41 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. The registration had been expired for weeks. This wasn't one bad morning. This looked like a pattern. And just like that, sympathy met resistance. That is how the best courtroom moments build. One revelation opens the heart. The next one tests whether it was opened too easily. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "All right, we understand part of the picture. Now we need the rest." Alina exhaled through her nose, and that was the first sign her fight was slipping. Not gone, just slipping. She opened the accordion folder. Inside were papers folded and unfolded so many times the edges had gone soft, a pink hospital wristband, 2 pharmacy receipts, a school attendance report with coffee stains on the corner, a letter on Crossroads, Rhode Island intake paper, a utility shutoff notice, a photograph of a boy sleeping in a car seat under a Spider-Man blanket. The room saw the contents before it knew the story, and already people were recalibrating. Hit that subscribe button if you can feel a story turning under your feet, because 1 minute later, the woman half the room thought was rude would force everyone to confront a question they didn't want to ask themselves. What if the person we call irresponsible is actually just outnumbered by disaster? My son's name is Mateo, Alina said. He's 7, severe asthma. He was admitted twice in January. Her voice was still flat, almost defiant, but now it sounded less like arrogance and more like fatigue sharpened into armor. My daughter is Sophia. She's 10. She knows how to fill out school forms because there were days I was cleaning offices at 6 in the morning after waitressing until midnight. My mother is Rosa Delgado, 62. Kidney failure. 3 dialysis appointments a week. I had a car that barely ran, a landlord who wanted rent I didn't have, and an ex who vanished when child support sounded less romantic than promises. Nobody moved. The camera, if this were a courtroom show segment, would have gone tight on Caprio's face right there. Not because he was emotional yet, because he was measuring, testing, separating pain from proof. Let's take them one at a time, he said. January 18th, expired registration. Elena nodded. I got stopped on Broad Street at 6:12 p.m. by Officer Lena Donnelly. I was coming from Hasbro Children's, heading to my shift at Starlight Diner on Atwell's. Mateo had a nebulizer treatment. I knew the registration was expired. I was trying to make it to Friday. Why Friday? Payday. Simple word, brutal meaning. Officer Keene spoke carefully now. Your Honor, there is body cam footage attached to that citation record. That got the room's attention again. Body cam footage evidence. Because in stories like this, people will debate tears all day, but they trust tape. Caprio asked for the summary. Keene read from the incident notes first. Vehicle stopped for expired registration. Driver cooperative but agitated. Minor child in back seat experiencing respiratory distress but not acute emergency. Verbal warning initially considered. Later citation issued after database return showed previous notice pending. Agitated, Alina repeated, with the kind of laugh that has no humor in it. My kid was wheezing. Judge Caprio raised a hand gently. Did you say that to the officer? I said worse. What did you say? Alina shut her eyes briefly. I said, if my son stops breathing while you're checking paperwork, I hope your report mentions the time. A ripple moved through the gallery, not approval, recognition. That sounded real, too real to be polished. Did the officer respond? Caprio asked. She looked in the back seat, saw him coughing, told me to calm down, and then she still wrote it. Officer Keene added. The officer noted the defendant later apologized. Alina stared at him. I apologized because Mateo started crying when I yelled. That line landed. The room began to understand that every sharp edge on Alina had been cutting inward first. Judge Caprio nodded once. All right, February 3rd, emergency loading zone. The second citation. The ugly one. The one nobody wanted to excuse. Alina gripped the folder tighter. Roger Williams, 2:13 in the morning. Why were you there? Because my mother's dialysis port started bleeding through the bandage, and my son had been coughing for an hour, and I didn't know which of them could wait. There it was. The choice no parent, no daughter, no human being should have to make. Which emergency gets the front seat? And still, even then, the law had one more objection waiting. Officer Keene opened another page. Your Honor, The vehicle was observed in the ambulance loading lane for 9 minutes. The driver was not in the vehicle when the citation was issued. 9 minutes. In a courtroom, numbers can sound crueler than insults. 9 minutes suggested not panic but absence, carelessness, disrespect. Enough time, maybe, for an ambulance to need that space. Enough time for the audience to harden again. Alina saw it happening. She saw disbelief re-entering faces that had just softened. And suddenly, the defensive shell snapped back on. "I wasn't getting coffee," she said sharply. "I was trying not to let my mother bleed on the lobby floor while my son turned blue." "Ms. Morales," Judge Caprio said, steady as ever, "if that's true, we need to establish it." "If that's true." It was barely above a whisper, but it carried. She shook her head and reached deeper into the folder. Her hands were trembling now, not with anger but with the effort of staying upright emotionally. She placed 3 things on the ledge beneath the microphone. A discharge summary dated February 3, 2025. A dialysis treatment note with Rosa Delgado's name. A tiny plastic inhaler spacer decorated with worn dinosaur stickers. No one spoke. Then Officer Keene did something unexpected. "Your Honor," he said, "hospital security also provided surveillance stills from the ER entrance because Ms. Morales appealed through the clerk's office after the boot order." That sentence changed everything again. There was video. There were stills. The room didn't need imagination anymore. It was about to get a picture. Like this video, if you believe one piece of footage can destroy 1,000 assumptions. Because what the court was about to hear next turned irritation into disbelief and disbelief into shame. The still image was not displayed on a giant screen. This wasn't television magic. This was municipal court. The judge and clerk had a monitor. The officer described the frames for the record, and Marissa Bloom leaned toward her screen to confirm. Frame 1, 2. 11 a.m. Silver Gray 2008 Honda Odyssey stops in the ambulance lane under the red emergency canopy. Frame 2. Driver exits from front seat. Frame 3. Rear sliding door opens. Frame 4. A small child is lifted from the second row, head on driver's shoulder. FR. Aim 5. Rear hatch opens, wheelchair removed. Frame 6. Older female placed in wheelchair. Frame 7. Young girl exits vehicle carrying backpack and pink blanket. Frame 8. Driver pushes wheelchair with one hand, carries child with other arm, young girl follows. By frame 9, they are inside. By frame 10, the ticket is already under the wiper blade. The room lost its air. Even described in plain terms, it was devastating. You didn't need to see it in motion to feel it. A mother carrying one child and moving another generation of her family at the same time, while a 10-year-old girl trailed behind holding a blanket like that counted as help. Marissa Bloom removed her glasses for a second and rubbed under one eye. Jerome Ellis looked down at the floor. Officer Keene, to his credit, did not defend the optics. The issuing officer likely did not see the full context, he said quietly. Likely. That word hovered in the room like a confession with paperwork on it. Judge Caprio leaned back. Ms. Morales, who was the young girl? Sophia. How old was she that night? 10. The judge looked back at the monitor, then at Alina. And you were alone? Yes. No one with you? No husband, no boyfriend, no sister, no neighbor, just me. There are moments in court when the gallery stops being an audience and becomes a witness. This was one of them. Everyone in that room knew they were watching a story that millions would talk about if the clip ever reached the internet. Not because it was sensational, because it was painfully ordinary in the worst way. A woman doing the work of 4 adults while the city fined her for where she set the car. But then the file produced one more obstacle. The school lane violation. February 27th, 3:41 p.m. Nathaniel Green Elementary Pickup Lane, Restricted Zone, Citation Camera Confirmation, no officer discretion, no obvious emergency. One case already looked redeemable, two maybe, but that third one stood there like a brick wall. Judge Caprio tapped the file lightly. Tell me about this one. Elena's shoulders, which had softened for the first time, stiffened all over again. It's not what it looks like. That sentence usually means it is exactly what it looks like. A few small laughs in the gallery, not mean ones, nervous ones. Elena almost smiled, almost. Then it vanished. That day, she said, I got a call at 3:18 from Sophia's school. Mateo had an asthma flare at recess. The nurse used his rescue inhaler but wanted him picked up. I was on the bus because my van got booted that morning. I got off 3 stops early, ran to my mother's building, borrowed my neighbor Mrs. Baptiste's Buick LeSabre, and drove to the school. I stopped where I shouldn't have because I saw the nurse at the door and I thought they were carrying him out. Were they? No. What happened? He'd thrown up. He was scared. He was breathing again by the time I got there. Then why not pull around? Because by then, the ticket camera had already flashed. Simple, plausible, still not enough. Caprio studied her. Do you have anything to support that? Elena nodded and slid forward another paper. School nurse incident report. Mateo Morales, February 27, 3:26 p.m. Shortness of breath during recess. Parent contacted. Officer Keene read it, then set it down. The city had the citation. Elena had the context. The room had a problem. Because this is what makes a story like this hit harder than a simple innocent or guilty clip. She did violate rules. She did stop where she shouldn't have. The city didn't invent the citations. The harm was real. An ambulance lane matters. A pickup lane matters. Registration matters. The law had a case. But so did life. That tension is where powerful stories live. Not in clear villains and saints, but in impossible math. Share this with someone who thinks compassion and accountability can't exist in the same sentence, because Judge Caprio was about to do something that separated justice from bureaucracy in one unforgettable line. He folded his hands again. Ms. Morales, listen to me carefully. A mistake tells me what happened for a moment. Your choices tell me who you are. Right now, I'm still trying to determine which I'm looking at. That quote would be repeated online 1,000 times if this were the clip everyone later talked about. Elena lowered her head. For the first time since she stepped up, she sounded small. I know how it looks. Yes, Caprio said, and I think you do. A long pause. Then he asked the question nobody expected. Why did you leave Douglas Avenue? The old address, the notices, the missing piece. The room felt it immediately. This was the doorway to the part of the story she did not want to tell. The officer looked up. Marissa stopped typing again. Even the 2 men waiting on the bench for a parking meter dispute looked fully invested now. Elena didn't answer. The judge repeated it softly. Why did you leave? Her eyes glistened, but she inked hard, furious at her own tears. Because Louis found us. Louis is my ex. Your children's father. Mateo's father. Sophia's dad left when she was 2. And what happened? Elena's thumb dug a crescent into the paper folder. He showed up drunk on January 7th at 11:40 at night, banged on the apartment door, woke the kids, said if I had money for rent, I had money for him. I didn't open. He went downstairs and smashed the windshield on my van with a tire iron. The gallery murmured before it caught itself. Caprio's face did not change, but his voice went quieter. Did you call the police? My daughter did. That got everyone. Sophia called. She was hiding in the bathroom with Mateo. She heard me crying. She took my phone and called 911 because she thought that's what grown-ups do when another grown-up is breaking things. Nobody in the room breathed the same after that sentence. A 10-year-old little girl in a bathroom calling 911 while her mother stood in the apartment listening to a tire iron shatter the one vehicle that held the whole family together. That image walked straight into the room and sat down with everyone. Officer Keene asked, almost under his breath, "Was a report filed?" Elena nodded and handed over a copy. Providence Police Incident Number 25107442. Property damage, disturbance. Suspect fled before arrival. No arrest at scene. That was the next revelation. Not just poverty, not just illness, violence, instability, children learning emergency procedures before multiplication tables. Judge Caprio read the report. Then he looked at her cracked blue keychain and, perhaps for the first time, saw the whole architecture of her life inside that small object. Keys to a vehicle that barely ran, a temporary room, a mother's apartment, a storage locker maybe, a life made of doors that never stayed secure. "Were you evicted?" he asked. "Technically, no." "What does that mean?" "It means the landlord said if police came again, we were out. It means the windshield was gone, the kids were terrified, and I packed what I could in garbage bags and left before he could put anything in writing." She said it without self-pity. That made it worse. A lot worse. Because self-pity lets the listener relax. It says, "Here is the emotion I want from you." Elena wasn't asking for emotion. She was delivering facts like someone too tired to decorate pain. Judge Caprio nodded toward the folder. "Where did you go?" "My mother's first, then a motel on Elmwood, then Crossroads for intake, then my mother's again, then the van when the shelter was full." "The van?" "Yes." "With the children?" "Yes." "With your mother?" "No, she stayed with my aunt 2 nights, then back in her apartment." That was the kind of detail that made the story impossible to dismiss as exaggerated. It was too specific, too fragmented, too ugly in ordinary ways. "Did your children sleep in the van?" Elena looked at the floor. 3 nights. That was the breakdown point. Not loud, not cinematic, no collapse, no scream. Just those 3 words, and then her shoulders started shaking once, hard, like her body had betrayed the agreement she made with herself not to fall apart in public. Marissa Bloom pushed a tissue box toward the ledge. Elena didn't take it. "I'm fine," she whispered. Judge Caprio said something then that people in that room would repeat later in the hallway, on phone calls, at dinner tables. "Sometimes the people who look the most defiant," he said, "are simply the most cornered." There are lines that sound good online, and there are lines that sound true in person. This was the second kind. Like this video, if you believe a courtroom should know the difference between disrespect and desperation. Because the next witness would turn this from a sad story into a case nobody in that room would ever see the same way again. From the second row, a woman raised her hand tentatively. Marissa looked to the judge. Caprio nodded. The woman stepped forward. Mid-30s, charcoal winter coat, ID badge still clipped to her lapel. Nina Patel, Family Support Coordinator, Crossroads, Rhode Island. She had not planned to speak, she said, but she had accompanied Ms. Morales that morning because childcare fell through and she wanted to help with paperwork afterward. Caprio swore her in. "What do you know about Ms. Morales?" he asked. Nina glanced at Elena first, as if asking permission with her eyes. Elena gave the smallest nod. "I met Ms. Morales on February 6th, Nina said. "She came for intake with her son Mateo and daughter Sophia. Her mother was not with them. The children were clean, polite, and exhausted. Ms. Morales had worked overnight and had not slept. She was trying to get a family placement but refused to separate from her children." "Was she eligible?" Yes, but there were capacity issues. We offered emergency vouchers for 2 nights at a motel. After that, she had to keep calling. Did she? Every day, sometimes twice. Nye. Na reached into her own folder. I also documented that on February 9th, a volunteer found Ms. Morales and the children sleeping in the parked minivan behind a laundromat on Valley Street because she said she had used the motel vouchers and couldn't wake her mother for another ride at 1:00 in the morning. The room absorbed that in stunned quiet. Behind a laundromat. Not in a driveway, not in some neat little hardship montage. Behind a laundromat. Caprio asked, "Did the children appear neglected?" "No, Your Honor. Tired, hungry, scared of being split up, but not neglected. In fact, the daughter was trying to make her mother smile by reading from a school library book with a flashlight." That image hit like a fist. A 10-year-old reading by flashlight in a parked van to keep her mother from breaking. This was no longer just Elena's struggle. This was layered suffering, a sick child, a brave daughter, a grandmother in renal failure, a mother sleeping upright so everyone else could lie down. Schadenfreude had left the room. Empathy had arrived, and it did not arrive quietly. Officer Keene cleared his throat. "Your Honor, may I say something for the record?" Caprio nodded. "I reviewed the appeal materials this morning because I assumed this would be a standard boot fee dispute. It's not. The surveillance from the hospital is consistent with what Ms. Morales described." That mattered. When the city's own side starts stepping back from its assumptions, the moral center of the case shifts in real time. But just when it looked like the current was finally turning fully in Elena's favor, the file produced another twist. "There is still an issue," Officer Keene said. "The school lane citation was camera verified, and the registration was expired prior to the medical emergency. Those are separate violations." There it was again. The wall. Compassion could explain. It couldn't automatically erase. That's why the room stayed locked in, because everybody could feel the next choice coming. Judge Caprio could indulge sentiment, or he could find a path through the law itself. Elena could keep fighting, or she could finally let down the armor and trust the room with the part she still hadn't said. Caprio looked at her. "Ms. Morales, I need the truth in full, no editing it to look better, no sharpening it to sound harder than it was, the truth in full. Can you do that?" She nodded, but barely. "Yes." He leaned forward. "Then tell me the part you're still leaving out." It was such a direct question that even Elena looked stunned by it. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Nina, looked at the floor, looked toward the courtroom doors as if calculating escape. Then she said, "I left out the reason I sounded angry to everyone in here." Nobody moved. "You want to know why I walked in like this?" she said. "Because when people in uniforms talk to me now, all I hear is what I owe." The room went still again. She inhaled shakily. "Rent, court, storage, hospital, school lunch balance, gas, copays, child support that never comes. Every phone call is money, every envelope is money, every rule is money. And if you don't have it, everyone talks slower to you like maybe you're too dumb to understand the problem is you." Nobody in the room could mistake that for arrogance anymore. It was humiliation boiled down past dignity. "I know I shouldn't have snapped," she continued, voice breaking now. "I know the officers were doing their job. I know the judge is doing his job, but I haven't slept more than 4 hours in one stretch since Christmas. Mateo coughs at night. My mother cries after dialysis because she thinks she's ruining my life. Sophia tries to make dinner from YouTube because she says I look tired. And when that boot went on my van, all I could think was, of course that too." That was the moment of realization. Not just for the courtroom. For Elena. She was no longer fighting the room. She was finally telling it the truth without trying to survive it first. "Your Honor," she said softly, I came in angry because I thought if I didn't sound hard, nobody would listen. That line cut deeper than anything she had said so far. Judge Caprio gave a slow nod. And now? Now I'm embarrassed. No, he said gently, now you're honest. That was another quote, another one people would carry with them. Share this with someone who has ever mistaken survival mode for attitude. Because what happened next is the reason people still believe certain judges matter. Caprio turned to the clerk. Do we have anything from the school? Marissa Bloom checked the documents. Yes, Your Honor. Attendance summary and a handwritten note attached. From whom? Looks like from the classroom teacher, Ms. Carla Mendes. Read it. Marissa adjusted the paper, steadying her voice. Ms. Morales has communicated frequently about Mateo's health needs and her mother's medical appointments. Sophia remains an excellent student despite repeated transport at ion disruptions. On February 27, Sophia asked if her brother could wait in the nurse's office longer because she did not want her mother to lose another day of work. I am submitting this note because I do not believe this family's school attendance issues reflect indifference. I believe they reflect emergency living conditions. By the time Marissa finished, even the men in the back row who had come in annoyed about parking meters were staring at Alina with softened faces. And then came the choice. Judge Caprio could lecture, he could reduce, he could split the baby and call it fairness, but he needed one more piece before he made the decision, and nobody expected where it came from. The courtroom door opened quietly. Jerome Ellis turned. A little girl stood there in a purple puffer jacket with a glitter zipper, dark curls frizzed from the cold, holding a folded white envelope in both hands. Sophia Morales. Every head turned. Alina's face drained of color. No, she was supposed to stay downstairs. Nina Patel stood half out of her seat. The sitter texted me. I'm sorry, she couldn't keep her. Sophia didn't cry. That somehow made it worse. She had the careful composure of a child who had seen too much adult panic and learned to move quietly around it. Jerome knelt to speak to her, then looked toward the bench. She says she has something for the judge. The room became electric. This was the kind of moment that feels scripted even when it is. The kind of moment people later say would go viral because everyone in the room knew they were seeing something raw enough to survive being clipped and shared and replayed. Nobody coughed. Nobody shuffled. Even the fluorescent buzz seemed to fade. Judge Caprio looked at Alina first. Is this all right? Alina covered her mouth, eyes flooding now. She nodded because she couldn't seem to produce words. Sophia walked forward. Purple leggings, scuffed white sneakers, a tiny silver star clipped to her jacket pocket. She held out the envelope with both hands like it mattered more than anything else in the building. On the front, in rounded child handwriting, it said, "For the judge if mom starts crying." You could hear people inhale. Caprio took the envelope carefully, as if it might tear under the weight of the room. He looked at Alina again, then opened it. Inside was a lined sheet from a school notebook, decorated in the corners with tiny blue hearts. His voice changed before he even finished reading the first line silently. He cleared his throat once, took off his glasses, and read aloud. Dear Judge, my mom said not to ask for favors because she says rules matter. But if you think she's bad, please know she only parks wrong when somebody she loves can't breathe or bleed correctly. The room broke. Not noisily, not dramatically, just all at once. Marissa lowered her head. Nina put a hand over her own mouth. Officer Keene stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Alina was crying openly now, one hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to hold herself together physically. Judge Caprio stopped reading for a moment. He had to. His eyes shone. He looked down, then up, then down again. When he continued, his voice was rougher. She buys chicken nuggets only on Fridays because that is when tips are better. She tells us to pretend the car is camping so we are not scared. She says being poor is not the same as being dirty, so we always wash our hands in gas station bathrooms if we have to. She says when people sound mean, maybe they are tired too. That was it. Caprio bowed his head and wiped beneath one eye. He could not hold back the tears. And because he didn't hide it, nobody else felt the need to hide theirs either. There is a kind of authority that becomes stronger the moment it lets itself be human. This was that kind. Like this video, if you believe strength is not pretending not to feel, because Judge Caprio was about to deliver one of the most powerful lines ever heard in that courtroom. He folded the note carefully and set it on the bench in front of him. Then he looked at Sophia, then at Alina, then at the file. No child, he said, voice thick but steady, should have to become brave because the adults ran out of help. That line hit the room like truth carved in wood. He turned to Officer Keene. On the emergency loading zone citation, based on the surveillance description, the medical records, and the immediate circumstances, I find that the stop was directly related to a genuine emergency involving both a minor child and an elderly dialysis patient. That citation is dismissed. There it was. The first justice-served moment. Not charity, not pity, a legal finding shaped by evidence and context. The room exhaled in relief. Alina shut her eyes and cried harder but quietly, relief crying, the kind that looks almost painful because the body is not used to letting go. Caprio continued, on the failure to appear penalties attached to notices sent to an address the defendant. T was no longer safely residing at. With corroboration through shelter intake and police report, those penalties are vacated. Another wave. Another turn. Marissa typed quickly now, the courtroom rhythm returning in service of mercy. But then came the catch. However, Judge Caprio said, and the whole room tensed on that word, the expired registration remains. The school lane camera citation also remains a valid issue, though I accept the mitigating context. Hope paused mid-breath. This is why great stories keep people watching, because resolution doesn't arrive clean. It arrives with conditions. Alina nodded before he even finished. Something in her had changed. The woman who had walked in ready to fight the room was gone. In her place was someone stripped down to truth. I understand, she said. Caprio looked at her closely. Do you? Yes, I still did those things. That was her redemption arc in one sentence. Not denial, not excuse, ownership. I still did those things, she repeated. I didn't mean harm, but I did them. Nobody told her to say that. That was the breakthrough, the moment where the defensive posture became humility. Judge Caprio gave the smallest smile. That matters. And then, just when it seemed the case had hit its emotional high point, there came the twist nobody saw coming. Alina reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a clear sandwich bag. Inside were folded singles, loose quarters, dimes, nickels, and a few crumpled fives. She set it on the ledge. I brought $43.27, she said. It's not enough, but I didn't want you to think I came here asking for a free pass. Some of that is mine. Some of it is Mateo's jar money. I'll put his back later. The room went dead still all over again. Even Caprio looked stunned. This was the twist after the tears. The point where the story stopped being about a woman begging for mercy and became about a woman refusing to surrender her dignity. She had brought what she had. Not enough to solve the problem, enough to prove her character. I'm not asking you to call me innocent, she said. I'm asking you not to crush us. That line went through the room like current. Share this with someone who knows the difference between wanting a handout and wanting a chance. Because what happened after that proved mercy can be earned without being purchased. Officer Keene asked to speak again. The judge allowed it. The officer stepped a little closer to the microphone, not as an enforcer now, but as a man reconsidering what he thought he knew. Your Honor, I've been doing this job 11 years. My mother raised me alone in South Providence. We had months where the car decided whether groceries got bought. I'm saying this because I don't want the record to say only what went wrong here. Ms. Morales did file an appeal. She did provide documentation, and after reviewing the materials, I would ask the court to consider the lowest permissible amount on the remaining matters. That was the unexpected compassion moment. Not from the judge, from the officer, a system voice becoming a human voice. Alina looked at him as if she could not quite believe what she had heard. Caprio nodded slowly. Thank you, officer. Then the judge leaned back, thinking, real thinking, not television thinking, not performative delay. You could see him working through the boundaries, what the law allowed, what fairness required, what mercy could survive on paper. When he spoke, he did it carefully. Ms. Morales, the law can count dollars. Justice has to count people. There was the line. The one people would quote most. The expired registration is reduced to the minimum statutory amount. The school lane citation, given the school nurse report and absence of reckless conduct beyond the stop itself, is reduced to a non-moving administrative penalty. Total remaining amount, $100. Alina stared, not understanding at first. 100, she whispered. 100, he said. Her knees almost buckled. Jerome took half a step forward without meaning to. Caprio raised a gentle hand. You will not pay it today. Now even the people who thought they had composed themselves lost the battle again. You will have 90 days, he said. And if you make a sincere effort and keep communication with the clerk's office, this court will work with you. Marissa will help set that up. I am also recommending referral to legal aid regarding the outstanding support issue and any tow fee review. Tow fee. The van. There was still that wound. Alina's eyes widened. The tow lot said I owed $812 with storage. I lost the van. Another twist. Because of course there was one more loss. Of course the machine had not stopped its citations. It had gone for the vehicle too. Officer Keene checked the file. Your Honor, the boot order triggered towing, but if the emergency citation and failure penalties are vacated, the storage escalation may be reviewable. Then review it, Caprio said immediately, promptly. The room felt the force of that. Calm, wise, powerful. Mercy with authority behind it. Alina shook her head as if reality was moving faster than she could follow. I work on Federal Hill. I had to take 2 buses at night after they took the van. I got written up for being late twice. Are you still employed? The judge asked. She hesitated. I was let go on Monday. That landed hard. Harder because it came late. Harder because it meant every citation had been part of a larger collapse already in motion. Why didn't you say that earlier? Caprio asked. She gave the saddest answer of the morning. Because there was already too much. There are lines no writer could improve, because life wrote them first. Caprio turned to Nina Patel. Are there employment services attached to your office? Yes, Your Honor. Please stay with Ms. Morales after this hearing. I will. Then, perhaps the most important part of the whole exchange, Caprio looked directly at Sophia. You wrote something very beautiful for your mother, he said. Sophia nodded, eyes wide, not smiling. Do you know why your note mattered? She shook her head. Because it told the truth kindly. That is a rare gift. Sophia looked at Alina then, as if checking whether it was all right to feel proud. That tiny glance destroyed what little distance remained in the room. Judge Caprio added, and your mother should know this too. Mercy isn't the opposite of accountability. Mercy is accountability with a soul. That was quote number 5, maybe number 6, by now nobody was counting. Like this video, if you believe kids should never have to defend their parents in court, because the next moment proved this hearing was about more than fines. It was about what kind of society notices suffering before it becomes collapse. Sophia took one careful step closer to her mother. Elena bent down and wrapped an arm around her. Not dramatic, protective, automatic. Mateo wasn't there, but somehow the room felt his presence in every mention of inhalers and waiting rooms and school nurse calls. Caprio wasn't finished. "Ms. Morales," he said, "I want to ask you one more question, and I want an honest answer. No pride in the way." Elena nodded, wiping her face. "If help is offered, will you accept it?" She looked like that question hurt more than the fines. People who have spent too long surviving often hear help as humiliation. That is one of the quietest tragedies in the world. After a long pause, she said, "I'm trying to learn how." That answer might have been the bravest thing she said all morning. The judge nodded once. "Good, because doing everything alone is not strength. It's sometimes just what happens when support fails. But when support appears, wisdom is letting it in." The room held onto that line too. This would have been enough for most stories. Tears, dismissal, reduction, redemption. But life rarely stops at the exact point a video clip would. There was still one more revelation, and it came from the note itself. Caprio glanced down at Sophia's paper again. "There is one sentence here I did not read." The room leaned in. Elena looked up quickly. "You don't have to." "I think I do," he said. He unfolded the page and read. "My mom told me if the judge is fair, don't ask him to save us. Just ask him to see us." If the room had recovered before, it hadn't now. Because that was the whole case, the whole philosophy, the whole moral complexity compressed into one child's sentence: not save us, see us. Judge Caprio set the note down and stared at it for a moment before speaking. "A courtroom can punish a mistake," he said quietly, "or it can interrupt a tragedy. Today we are going to interrupt one." Nobody in that room would forget that line. Not the clerk, not the officer, not Nina, not the people waiting on their own cases, not the woman in the third row who had come in bored and was now wiping her face with both hands. Everyone in the room knew they had just heard something bigger than a traffic ruling. This was the moral center of the entire morning. Marissa finished entering the dispositions and looked up. "All set, Your Honor." Caprio nodded. "Ms. Morales, your next compliance date is June 12 at 9:00 a.m. You do not need to bring your daughter into court next time." A tiny ripple of laughter broke the tension. For the first time, Elena actually smiled. Not because things were fixed, because she had been treated like a person again. "I'll find childcare," she said. "And if you can't," he replied, "you call the clerk's office ahead of time. Communication prevents a lot of pain." "Yes, sir." She started to gather the papers with trembling hands. Sophia helped, carefully stacking the forms in the accordion folder as if it were part of a ritual she already knew too well. Nina stepped closer. Officer Keene returned to his table, but not before giving Elena a small nod that meant more than an apology would have. Then, Caprio said, "Ms. Morales." She looked up. "Your daughter sees you." That nearly broke her all over again. "Live in a way," he continued, "that helps her remember not the fear but the courage." Elena pressed her lips together and nodded. "I will." That was the resolution inside the courtroom. But the best stories don't end when the bench goes quiet. They end when time tests whether the moment was real. 3 months later, on Thursday, June 12, 2025 at 8:58 a.m., Marissa Bloom was organizing morning files when she saw a familiar name on the compliance list. Elena Morales. Same case number. Same courtroom. Only this time, when the door opened, the whole room noticed the difference before anyone said a word. She looked lighter. Not rich, not transformed by miracle music and perfect lighting, just lighter. Her hair was down and brushed smooth at the ends. She wore a maroon cardigan over a cream blouse, dark jeans without frayed hems, and black flats that looked new enough to matter. She carried the same accordion folder, but the green elastic band had been replaced. This one was pink, a small thing, a huge thing. And she was not alone. Mateo stood beside her in a striped polo, clutching a toy ambulance. Sophia carried a library book and wore her hair in two neat braids with yellow ties. Rosa Delgado, thinner but smiling, sat carefully on the back bench with a portable oxygen concentrator humming by her feet. Nina Patel was there too, grinning before the case was even called. When Marissa announced the matter, a few people in court recognized the name from whispers and hallway retellings. The room woke up immediately. Elena approached the microphone, and this time she didn't look like she was entering a fight. She looked like she was keeping a promise. "Ms. Morales," Judge Caprio said, and there was unmistakable warmth in his tone, "how are you?" "Better," she said, and the word glowed with earned truth. He checked the file. "I see payment made in full, ahead of schedule." "Yes, sir. I paid the last $20 yesterday." The room gave her quiet applause before anyone realized they were doing it. Not disruptive, instinctive. Caprio smiled. "Tell me what happened." And this was the epilogue that made the whole story complete. Nina Patel spoke first, with the judge's permission. Elena had been placed in a transitional housing program in late March. Not fancy, but stable. 2 bedrooms, bus access, case management. Legal aid had helped her reopen a child support enforcement action against Luis Vega. The tow lot fees had been reviewed and reduced after the emergency citation was dismissed, and a local church repair fund had helped restore the Honda Odyssey enough to get it back on the road. A mechanic named Andre Baptiste, nephew of Mrs. Baptiste from the building, replaced the windshield at cost on a Saturday morning because, in his words, "kids can't grow up in a bus schedule." The room smiled at that. Then Elena added her part. She had found work again, not at Starlight Diner, at Mercy General Hospital in patient transport, evenings, 28 hours a week to start, then full-time by May. Tasha Green, the ER nurse who remembered her from the February night at Roger Williams, had written a reference after seeing the court clip shared in a local community group. Mateo now had a home nebulizer that worked. Rosa's dialysis rides were arranged through insurance transportation twice a week. Sophia had perfect attendance in April and won second place in a citywide writing contest, with an essay called "The Night We Pretended We Were Camping." That title alone hit the room in the heart. Caprio asked, "And how is the car?" Elena laughed softly. "Still sounds like cookware falling downstairs, but it starts." Even the officer laughed at that. Then came the proof of transformation. The part every great viral courtroom story needs so it doesn't feel like a temporary emotional spike. A visible, ongoing commitment. "I also volunteer Thursday mornings," Elena said. "At Crossroads, front desk. Mostly I help mothers fill out intake forms when they're too embarrassed to ask which lines matter." The room reacted exactly how you'd hope. Not with surprise, with recognition. Of course she did. Of course someone seen in her worst moment would choose to become sight for someone else. Caprio leaned forward, smiling now in full. "Why did you start doing that?" She answered without hesitation. "Because somebody interrupted my tragedy." That line brought the story home. Share this with someone who needs proof that mercy can multiply. Because right there, in one sentence, Elena turned from defendant into evidence. Caprio looked toward Sophia. "And are you still writing notes to judges?" The room laughed. Sophia grinned for the first time anyone in court had seen. "No, sir." "Why not?" Because Mom says now, we ask for help before court. That got another laugh, and this time Alina laughed too, hand over her face, not from shame but from rel. Eve. Then Sophia reached into her library book and pulled out another folded sheet. The room erupted before she even spoke. Caprio pointed playfully. What's that? A new note, Sophia said. Should I be nervous? She shook her head and brought it forward. Alina looked mortified. Nina was already laughing. Matteo bounced on his toes, holding the toy ambulance like it was a medal. Caprio opened the note. It read, Dear Judge, thank you for seeing us. My mom says our apartment is small, but peace takes up less room than fear. Also, Matteo still hates broccoli. Love, Sophia. Now the laughter and tears came together, the way they do only after a hard season has finally broken. Caprio read the line again. Peace takes up less room than fear. He looked at the room. Ladies and gentlemen, that may be the wisest statement we hear in this courtroom all year. Another quote, another moment, another reason people would replay it. He turned back to Alina. You came in here the first time sounding angry. Yes, sir. Today you sound different. I am different. How? She looked at her children before answering. I know now that asking for help is not the same as failing them. There was the final transformation. Not financial, not magical, psychological, deep, lasting. That is always the stronger ending. Judge Caprio nodded with quiet satisfaction. Good, because your children do not need a perfect mother, they need a truthful one. If the first hearing went viral for tears, this second one would go viral for healing. Officer Daniel Keene, who had returned for another docket that morning, asked to speak once more. Caprio allowed it, smiling already. I just wanted to say, Keene said, my mother watched the first hearing. She told me to tell Ms. Morales she's rooting for her. That small statement did something enormous. It completed the forgiveness twist. The system had not only corrected itself, it had personally reached back with grace. Alina looked genuinely stunned. Tell her thank you. I will. Then Caprio did something he didn't have to do, which is often the difference between decent and memorable. He asked Marissa for the original note. The one Sophia wrote in March, he said. Marissa retrieved a photocopy from the file. He handed it to Alina. Keep this, he told her, not for the pain in it, for the witness in it. There was a little girl who knew her mother was fighting for them before the world caught up. Alina took the paper with both hands like it was fragile. I framed the other one, Sophia blurted. The room burst again. Alina blinked. You what? Sophia nodded proudly. In my room, next to the writing contest ribbon. Caprio laughed, then looked at Alina with the expression that says he understands more than the room knows. Then you have your evidence of this day, he said. Don't waste it. People think the power in courtroom stories comes from the sentence, the fine, the dismissal. Sometimes it does. But sometimes the deepest power comes from being seen accurately at the exact moment you expected to be reduced to your worst paperwork. That was what happened here. A single mother walked into a courtroom looking angry, defensive, and guilty enough for half the room to make up its mind. She had expired registration. She had parked where she shouldn't have. She had missed notices. On paper, she looked careless. But paper didn't show the 2:13 a.m. hospital run with a wheezing child on one shoulder and a bleeding mother in a wheelchair. Paper didn't show the 10-year-old with a flashlight reading in a parked van behind a laundromat. Paper didn't show the calloused hands from double shifts, the gas station hand washing, the chicken nuggets only on Fridays because tips were better then.